I'm Geraldine Kaleem, Student Services Librarian, and today I have with me Savannah Nolan, who is our Instruction and Faculty Services Librarian, and Heather Simmons, who is our Associate Director for Instruction and I'm going to get it
Excess services.
and access services. I wanted to get it right. So they are here today to talk to you about how to improve your study methods, how to retain information better, how to manage your time better, and all the things you need to know to be a successful law student. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Heather and Savannah.
Thank you very much. So let's go to the first slide. So law school is a kind of unique experience. If you're here in this webinar, you probably have always been a top student. That's how you got into law school. You did really well in undergrad, really well in high school. So if you're experiencing a B or a C now, this might be the first time. You've always gotten the prize, and maybe this is the first time that you have not. And that's okay. This is going to be a fun learning experience. Next slide. And one thing that's going to help you through this is what we call a growth mindset. I'm going to kick it to my co-presenter Heather here to talk about a growth mindset.
So growth mindset is, the motto of growth mindset is, I'm not there yet. It's not that you can't do it, it's that you haven't figured out what works for you. And your brain is a muscle. If you exercise it, it will grow. It is possible to become smarter. It's not that you're born with a certain IQ and you have it or you don't. All of these things can be improved by figuring out what works for you. And the other concept here is grit. Grit is a combination of passion and perseverance. So if you remember when you were learning to ride a bicycle, when you were a little kid and you kept falling off and it didn't work, but you really wanted to learn to ride a bicycle, so you kept trying. You need to find that same passion. Why did you apply to law school in the first place? How do you want to change the world when you graduate? Find that passion and it will help you move forward.
So one of the major tools that helped me finally understand this was self-regulated learning theory. And I first came across it in a book called Teaching Law by Design, which you'll see mentioned at the end of the slide deck. And there are two concepts that we talk about. It's pedagogy and andragogy. Maybe you've heard of pedagogy. It's what we usually talk about when we talk about education. What is your pedagogical reasoning behind doing it one way or the other? But PED, P-E-D, is actually the STEM for children, just like pediatrics, right? And andragogy is how we study education in adults. One example of this is voulez-vous un bonbon, right? So when I was in kindergarten or preschool, my brother and I were both taught in a Montessori class. We were taught French and Spanish at the same time. We got them all confused because it was just memorization and regurgitation. To this day, my brother is 32 and he can still say, voulez-vous un bonbon? Oui, s'il vous plaît. Merci beaucoup. Because he knew that if he did that interaction with the teacher, he would get candy. He has no idea what it means. I didn't know this word was spelled this way until I Googled it. I just know the sounds. I don't know the verb. I don't know how to translate it. That is the kind of core of pedagogy. Andragogy, instead, we're going to focus on taking responsibility for our learning process. So one of those tools is self-regulated learning. It is the process by which successful students manage their own learning process. It is profoundly not just memorization and regurgitation. So how are you taking control of your learning? Next slide, please. So these are things that self-regulated learners do. They view learning as something the student does rather than something done to or for the student. They are interested in the subject matter, well prepared for class, ready with questions, comments, or feedback. They seek opportunities for practice and feedback and create them. They're unafraid to fail or admit a lack of understanding, and they're driven to rectify failure and correct understanding. This is the thing no one tells you about law school. Law school is kind of best viewed as teaching yourself with the guidance of your instructors. Also, I will point out your instructors are not perfect. We are just further along the path than you are. Think of us kind of like hiking guides. We know the terrain a little bit better, and we would like to lead you through the terrain, but we are also still learning and growing. Next slide, please. So one example of this, this is from Oxford. This is the Bodleian Library. I finally came across a description from A Discovery of Witches, which is a book. It's now a TV series. And in it, one of the main characters, Diana Bishop, just kind of wakes up in the morning, goes rowing, and then goes to the Bodleian and just works and works and works. That is her whole PhD program, or I guess she's a professor. So that is her whole work day. And that's the kind of core idea of this self-directed learning. You are driving it completely. It's better done in other graduate programs and PhD programs. In law, we have it's a little bit hidden because of the Socratic method, but it is still there. The work that you do is largely when you are reading. It's when you are trying to get the understanding for yourself. And then in class, when you enter the Socratic questions, you're also working through that level of understanding as a group. Next slide, please. So this is the how for the self-regulated learning cycle. You want to sit down in the planning phase, decide what you're going to learn. Maybe your professors, in my case, Heather and I teach an advanced legal research class. We give the students learning objectives for each class. So you sit down, you decide what you're going to learn, set a mastery goal. When will you know that you have mastered this section? Will it be when you can answer the questions at the back of the reading? Will it be when you can answer some multiple choice questions or an essay at the back of an E&E? Predict success. What is success going to look like? And plan how, when, and where you're going to do the thing. That can be very important. One story I love to tell, one of my classmates, I went to UGA Law, one of my classmates, our first semester Christmas exams did not do very well because his child was born halfway through our fall 1L exams. Surprisingly, his head was not in the game, even though he had his schedule shifted. He spent the rest of his time in law school coming in every day, 8 a.m. until 5 or 6 at night. He treated it just like a job. He sat in the library in between classes and knocked out his work. He had a set schedule. He knew what and when he was going to do things. You don't have to exactly do that, but you should have some sort of plan. Moving into the implementation phase, execute your plan and focus your attention. This can be really hard, especially in the age of Twitter and social media. You can take breaks, absolutely. I love the Pomodoro method. So I work for 25 minutes on just one task, and then I take a 5-minute break. Maybe I go get water, maybe I check my email, and then I come back for 25 minutes and I work again. Some days that might work. Some days that might not work for you. Some days you really, or some projects you really need to get into it. You need to focus for 2 hours before you take a break. And that moves into this next point of attend to the effectiveness of your Trojan strategies. Are you too burnt out to do something today? Do you need to switch tasks and work on something else? Is being in the library not working today because they're cutting down that tree in front of the building? Then maybe you need to move. And that kind of leads us into the reflection phase. Evaluate your learning. Did you actually learn what you set out to learn when you set your mastery goal for the day? Can you determine why that may or may not be? And can you plan improvement for future similar learning tasks? If you are really struggling with a particular concept, can you plan to go into that professor's office hours to work through it with them after you've worked on your own for a little bit? And of course, this is a cycle. So once we're done with reflection, we're going to plan again for our next session. Everything flows very well into everything else. Next slide, please.